Hi folks, I'm Hector Garcia, CPA and Advanced QuickBooks Pro Advisor. In this video, we're going to be talking about banking rules for QuickBooks Online. Now, I'm going to split this video up into 3 sections. On the first section, I'm going to explain what are banking rules within the context of online banking or downloaded transactions in QuickBooks Online, so we understand contextually exactly what we're talking about. On the second section, I'm going to talk about exporting those bank rules so you can import them back in maybe a different company file, or you can edit that export in Excel. And I'll show you exactly how that works. And you can import it back into QuickBooks Online as new rules. And in the third section, which is the one I'm most excited about, is I'm going to teach you a very specific technique that I developed internally to speed up the process of importing bank rules into any QuickBooks Online company file. And what I do is I take an Excel spreadsheet with a list of vendors, a list of categories, and I import them as rules. I'm going to show you. You can see that in that third section. You can also fast forward straight to any section that you want. I'll put in the description the timelines. All right, I'm in QuickBooks Online now, and I'm looking at the online banking screen. Now, a couple of really important things is you need to make sure that your vendor column, which is going to be right here in the middle somewhere, it's enabled. It happens not to be enabled in this particular file. So I'm going to click on the gear menu and I'm going to enable payee. Payee is one of the most important concepts in the banking rules world because you want QuickBooks to detect some information that was downloaded from the bank and automatically add a vendor or a payee from your database. That way it can use that to also categorize the transaction correctly. Now, one of the things you're seeing here is the grouping version of QuickBooks Online Banking. It's actually one of my favorite ways to work, which is group all the transactions by the payee or what QuickBooks thinks the payee is. I'm going to turn that off really quick. Click here, it says turn off grouping. So I made sure that grouping was turned off and payee was on, just so I can show you exactly how bank rules would work. Now, you notice that these transactions were downloaded from a credit card. QuickBooks automatically tries to categorize everything for you. Now, for the most part, they do a pretty good job. Remember, QuickBooks has millions of accounts. They can look at what other people do in sort of what they call metadata, and they can try to make their AI or the automatic classification better and better. However, sometimes it can make a mistake. For example, this place here called Anthony's is actually a restaurant, and it's calling this cost of goods sold. That could happen. It could get it wrong. It happens all the time. So what we do with bank rules is we sort of reteach or teach QuickBooks how to behave with these automatic categorization from downloaded transactions. So we'll start with an example. I'm going to go ahead and create a rule for these Anthony's. Now, the other thing I want to add is this Anthony's is actually QuickBooks' cleaned up version of the payee list. That's actually not exactly how it comes in through the bank. I'm going to come up here and click on this gear menu as we did before. I'm going to click on another setting called show bank details. So if you wanted to do this at the same time that you're watching this video and you want it to look exactly like in my screen, you had to turn on payee, turn off grouping, and then turn on bank detail. Then I'm going to scroll down, look for Anthony's again, and this is actually called Anthony's 1011 Weston. Now, that didn't add any additional context, but sometimes it's good to see the raw information prior to making a decision how to categorize that. So there's 2 ways to create the banking rule. One way is to click on the transaction. So I'm actually looking at the transaction and making the decision right here on the fly to create that rule. Now, in some cases, QuickBooks will add a little thing here that says add and the vendor's name next to it, or this cleaned up version of the vendor's name that gives you a quick option to quickly create that vendor's name on the fly. I would suggest always use that if your vendor is not already in your database. If you wanted to skip that, you would click on the drop-down menu here and then pick or search for your vendor already in the database. You can also start typing to see if it shows up. In this case, it doesn't show up. So I can also create it through this window. So I don't have to click on the little add button, or if the add button is not showing up on your screen, you can just type it yourself. So I'm going to call this Anthony's pizza, I just typed the vendor's name in there. I opted to manually type it rather than to click on that add button in the bottom. Now I'm going to click on add Anthony's Pizza. The same window pops up, this time with what I wrote, the custom writing. Then I can choose whether it's a customer, employee, or vendor. In this case, it's a vendor. And then I'm going to click on save. So that was the first step. You definitely want to create that vendor's name. You want that in the database. If it's not already in there, and double check so you don't create a duplicate. Next thing is, once the vendor is created, I'm going to go ahead and create the rule. So I'm going to click down here where it says create rule. So I'm not following through with the categorization in this screen, not yet. I'm manually doing this by clicking on create rule. So I click on create rule, and then you're going to see a window sort of slide through the side, letting you know, okay, it looks like we started the process here, but we're actually going to explicitly create a rule for this. So where it says, what do you want to call this rule? Usually I just copy and paste the vendor's name on it, just because there's no really need to put a fancy name to that rule. Where it says here, money in or money out, it's just telling you, is this rule for deposits coming in or is it for expenditures? So here it says Chase card. You can create rules that are exclusive to one particular account. So you can have one credit card that uses one set of rules, one bank account, or a different credit card using a different set of rules, or you can do one set of rules for all your accounts. Simply by clicking on all bank accounts, you can pick and choose which accounts are going to be context for that rule. Next thing you're going to notice is here, description contains Anthony's. Sometimes to avoid confusion, what I do is I create both description creates Anthony's and bank text contains Anthony's. And basically the difference between this is description would be QuickBooks' cleaned up version. And then notice, I don't know if you can tell from here, but right here, it's grayed out a little bit, but there's no apostrophe on the original bank text. So if I were to do bank text with the apostrophe, it won't catch them, right? Because that apostrophe gets on its way. Whereas if I do description with the Anthony's, that will catch it. So that's sort of a weird catch-22 situation. So if I wanted to stay true to the vendor's real name that comes in through the bank, which is usually my recommendation, I would use bank text instead. So it's up to you whether you want to do QuickBooks' cleaned up version, your own version, and create do double rules, bank text and description. But generally, when I do this on my own, I just put bank text, put the raw information as it comes in through the bank, what you actually see on the bank statement, and go from there. Next thing is category. I'm going to call this meals. So let's do meals with clients. Let's assume that I want every single time for Anthony's to come in for me to do that. Now, one thing you will notice is on the memo, when you create a rule from a transaction, QuickBooks assumes that that one original line that came in through the banking wants to be, you want to repeat it each time. And I don't want that. When I create a rule like this, I don't want that. I hardly ever want the memo to contain anything in there. So usually delete that memo in there. I'm not saying that all memos will be deleted. I'm saying that in this particular bank rule, the original memo or the original bank line or bank description is not going to be overwritten by whatever I wrote in there. If I do want to add something in there, what I can do is I can add a space, and usually I'll add a note, like I'll do hashtag rule. That's just for me to know when I'm looking at the transactions later on in the future, whether that was created through a rule or was entered manually. That can add some context into judging whether or not the transaction might be accurate or not. And always use add this to memo, basically appends it. That way it can bring the original memo from the specific transaction being downloaded, plus whatever I decided to add in this rule. So then it is gonna make more sense once we start creating transactions. Then I'm gonna click on save. And oh yeah, on the name, I can't have an apostrophe. So that was my mistake. So I'm gonna fix it, no apostrophe on the name, and then click on save. So that creates the rule, or what I call an explicit rule. Is now in the permanent database of QuickBooks Online's, let's call it artificial intelligence memory. And then every time Anthony shows up, again, these not only the transactions will go to the right category, it will also add the payee or the vendor from our database. We want that. That is a good thing. So once things are created through the rules, we have a higher level of certainty that these things are being done correctly. Let's do another broken egg, and this is a good example because there's a 1038 and a 1057. That means they're different store numbers, and I kind of want to keep that information because that could provide some additional context. Like, for example, this store number is by the office, so that could be meals with clients, where this store number is in New York. That's definitely travel. That could go into two different categories potentially. So again, this is where the memo or copying the original bank line into the memo becomes a valuable thing. So we did the rule from the transaction. Now we're going to do is we're actually going to click on rules here in the top. You can also go where it says banking and then click on rules. Essentially, depending on how your screen looks, it could be hidden somewhere in the buttons. It's either called rules or bank rules. You should be able to find it. There's a direct URL you can use to go straight to there if you can't find it. I'll put the direct URL in the description just in case. So once you're logged into QuickBooks, you could just copy and paste the URL and you get into bank rules. There's the bank rule that we created. Now, I'm going to create a new rule for that another broken egg. So I'm going to go to a new rule here in the top right, click on new rule, and then same thing. So I'm going to call this another broken egg. I'm going to copy and paste that into bank text. If you remember when I said I prefer bank text over description any time of the day. Then when we go into category, I'm going to put here, let's say meals. I just want it to go to meals with clients for now. And then we can change those things manually later on. Under payee, I probably don't have another broken egg in here. So I'm going to click on add new and paste that. And a little bit later on under the third section of this video, I'll talk about importing those payees and vendor names, which you're going to find quite interesting. So I'm going to click on save. So there's my payee, and then there's my category. And then where it says assign more, I'm going to be consistent, add a space, hashtag rule. Again, that's for me to know when things are classified, whether it was done with a rule or without. I'm going to click on add this memo to all matching transactions. It basically means I don't want this memo to be overwritten from the original text. I want it to be appended, especially when they have store numbers, as we mentioned earlier. Then I'm going to click on save. So that was a manual rule that we created, not from the banking screen, but from the rules screen. Then I'm going to click on banking. And then we're going to go down here. Let's get rid of this grouping here that we had turned on earlier. And I do like the grouping. That's a subject for another video. But we're just going to go look for another broken egg. And then notice that this stuff was automatically categorized by the bank rules. Now I'm going to click on this 1057. Let's say that one happens to be travel meals, not meals with client. So I can click on that and notice that the original memo got added in there, which is awesome. And by the way, if you're not seeing these memos being added into your QuickBooks Online file, there's also a setting in the gear menu that says a copy bank detail to memo. If that was off, that information would not come in there, and that's not a good thing. You want the memo to bring in the original information, and then notice it appended hashtag rule because I told it to do that. Okay, so that's it. That's how we created the rules from that screen. Now I'm gonna show you one more bonus way to create a rule, and this happens when you start doing the same thing sort of over and over. And let me show you. Let's say I go to Apple here, and I just manually let's create the Apple vendor, and then I manually want to put this into. Do I have software and apps? Perfect. And then I'm going to click on add. So I did it once, and then QuickBooks will detect that I did that once. Then I'm going to go to the next one. I'm going to do it one more time. Select Apple in here, put the software category, click on add, and then now QuickBooks is sort of paying attention. It's saying, wait a minute, this guy's doing the same type of transaction over and over. Let's do it one more time. I'm going to come here, select Apple, select the category, and this is happening already because banking does try to speed up the process. At some point, there should have been a pop-up that says, hey, do you want QuickBooks to suggest a rule for you? If it didn't happen, and this is probably because it's turned off, and great lesson about dealing with the settings here, there's a little option here that says show suggested rules. I had it off, so naturally it ended up never asking me about it. So I'm going to turn that on. That way it actually starts suggesting a new rule for me. I'm going to come over here. And remember, you notice that I kept doing it over and over and over, and it never asked me. Now that I start adding them, QuickBooks will detect the pattern. Let's do one more. We'll select Apple here and then click on Add. And the pop-up comes up and it says, hey, it looks like you've been trying to do same thing over and over, and there's a pattern here, essentially. Would you like us to now go ahead and create the rule, because you're proving to us through your behavior that you're pretty much doing the same thing for that particular payee. So we're going to say yes, in this case, create rule. And when I say click on create rule, everything I did manually with that drawer that came to the right side, it automatically gets created as a rule. Notice all the transactions got applied with that rule automatically. I'm going to go back to my rules section here, and then we're going to see here it says suggested. I like keeping that in there. I usually don't modify that. That also lets me know contextually that it is a rule, but it wasn't created by manually going into every setting. It might be missing something, like for example, adding that special hashtag rule, which we'll come back and talk about why or how that's important or contextual. So I'm going to click on edit here, and then I can see everything that happened, and everything looks good so far. Notice it is still drawing from the description, but that's okay because QuickBooks did it for me automatically. So I'm not going to touch it. I'm going to go here, it says assign more, and then I'm going to add hashtag rule, add, and then click on save. So now my rules are created. One thing I forgot to mention, I'm going to go edit again. This rule, when QuickBooks creates rules for you automatically, it adds the word suggested. It starts with the vendor's name. It adds the category next to it. So it makes the rule a little bit more explicit. That way it's easier to search. That's a good thing, not a bad thing. I was being lazy before by just doing a shorter name. But it will only create the rule automatically to the specific source account. So if you wanted that rule to apply across all banks and credit cards, you have to check on that box and see what that looks like. Another really cool feature I like about rules is this little button here that says test rule. When you click on test rule, before you click on save and close, it actually tells you whether or not there are transactions pending in which this rule would work. And I'm going to show you how that works and whether or not you would find yourself hitting that test rule button and seeing that it's valuable for you. So I'm going to go ahead and click on save. And then there's my rules. I'm going to go back into banking. And once I scroll down to Apple, and for some reason it's defaulting to grouping, which is actually a good thing. And that's a different topic for a different video. That's also a really useful thing. But I'm going to go down here and see all my Apple transactions were automatically set up by the rules. Now, how rules are valuable in this case is, well, number one, it will give you higher level of sense of security that these things are being classified correctly. And also, it can speed up the addition of these transactions. You could go to each of these and click on add, and then go to the next one and click on add. You could. I mean, half the work is done for you. Other thing you can do is you can click on the first one from Apple, for example, go all the way down to the last one, and you pretty much trust that all these are the same category. I mean, these are a lot of transactions. Hold the Shift key on my keyboard, click on the last box, select all 79 of them, and then I can simply click on accept. I can also click on update and change the vendor name or the category. It won't change the rule. It'll just change the actual categorization of those specific transactions. The rules will always stay the way you set them up. And I can accept them through here. That's one option, right? Where you can just select them in a group once you kind of inspected them and it makes sense to you. For that, you will notice that I might have an issue somewhere later on when we review accuracy and look at the reports. We'll go back to that, try to remember this piece. And then we'll look at the other ones that are still marked by rule. It's a really cool feature, which is a filter up here where I can click on the drop-down menu and I can click on rule applied. And what it will do is it will only show me the transactions that have rules applied. That way I don't have to do the shift click. I can just click up here in this little box, select all. And then once I've reviewed all these and I'm comfortable with them, I click on accept. So it's an awesome thing. It is a beautiful thing. I'm going to go back here for a second and we're going to do one more thing, which is I'm going to create a rule that's not going to work. And let me show you what I mean by that. So let's say, for example, I'm reading here Adobe Acrobat Pro, and I'm going to go ahead and create a rule manually. So I'm going to come here into rules. I'm going to go to new rule, and then I'm going to type Adobe. And I'm going to misspell it. I think that's maybe a good example to give here. So I'm going to misspell that because that could happen. I'm also going to put this into software and apps, and I'm going to create the vendor. Now the vendor can be misspelled. The vendor could be correctly. It's actually not that important that the vendor is misspelled or not. What matters here is in this piece here, am I misspelling it? So I'm going to misspell it now, and I'm going to click on test rule, and then it tells you, hey, something's wrong with your rule. So it's really good to test a rule, especially if you created the rule after you saw the transaction, because it'll give you a quick just sort of check to see what could you have done wrong. So I'm going to click here and make my correction. And now the vendor or the payee name is wrong. That gets changed in a different place. Right now, we're just concerned about the rule. So here's this bank text. I'm going to fix it to Adobe. Click on test rule, and it tells me, yep, there's 11 transactions associated with it. Once you become really comfortable with the rules, you can click here. It says auto add, and then you don't have to add them later on. You already trust your rules. All that stuff will get categorized automatically. When here where it goes to memo, remember I used to do hashtag rule. Now I'm going to do hashtag, where is my hashtag? Auto rule, okay? And then so those are two things that I do. Always click on add. So when I'm looking at my reports and I'm looking at the transactions, I'm seeing which stuff was created by a rule, what stuff wasn't created by a rule, and which stuff was an auto rule. I'm going to click on save. And then my rule is created. Then I'm going to go back into banking. And then I'm going to search for Adobe Acrobat. Let me turn off that grouping. Again, it's kind of interesting how that grouping sticks in there. That's cool. By the time you watch this video, that issue might have been solved, or maybe that will be there forever. Who knows? So right here, nothing for Adobe. So you're freaking out saying, wait a second, hey, where are my Adobe transactions? You can always go back here to where it says categorized. Click on categorized. And then in here, you can see the things that were set up with auto add. So right here it says auto add, and that pretty much lets you know these things were created with auto add. Now here it says all transactions. We can change this to no rule, any rule, or auto rule. And in here, the hashtag rule memo has no context really, not really useful. In here, we don't need that. We can just select these filters here, and that gets done for us. So I can go to auto rule, and I can see what's created through an auto rule, or I can switch this to any rule, and I can see all the things that were set up with a regular rule or an auto rule. So you can also filter these, and it should make it very, very easy for you to identify and clean up, and then notice whether or not they were created correctly. Now I'm going to go back for your review here, and then I'm going to create another transaction. I'm going to look for something else that goes into software. So let's say that I'm just going to pick a transaction here that we're going to categorize under software. Let's do this one. So I'm going to go to Audible. I'm going to create it manually. I'll create the vendor using this add button, which I love. And I'm going to put this into software and apps. Notice I'm not adding anything with the hashtag rule. I'm just letting these be. Then I'm going to click on add. That creates that transaction with Audible. I'm going to do one more time. Click it and then click on add. And at some point, it should ask me whether or not I want to create the rule. I'm going to exclude auto add here for a second. Actually, I'm going to keep auto add here for a second just to add some context to that. And then I'm going to click on create rule. Now, when I did the auto add, all the transactions were going to be added automatically into our books right after, which just happened. And notice I didn't get to edit the rule prior to entering it. So the hashtag rule thing didn't come up. And that's my own techniques, my own weird thing that I do. And I'm going to show you why that's contextual. At this point, you should understand how rules work. I mean, we did a pretty thorough example. I'm going to show you now a report where we can start now looking at the transactions and seeing or deciding whether we may have done this correctly or not. So I'm going to go into reports, and then I'm going to pull up a profit and loss report in the reports window. So let's go down here to where it says profit and loss. And then I don't remember which dates we use. So I'm just going to click here on all dates, click on run report. And then I'm going to go down to a category I use quite a bit, which was a software and apps category. Notice I got $5,000 worth of transactions in there. I'm going to click on that. Then I'm going to look at all the details. Now, as you can tell here, on the memo description, and I can expand this a little bit, it doesn't really hurt me, the fact that that hashtag rule and auto rule was in there. And I might even be ignoring that when I'm looking at these things. Usually I'm looking at these categories, and then maybe I'm grouping this by vendor or payee. And then I'm just making sure that the things that are supposed to go in here are categorized correctly. But when I'm looking at these, usually there's no mechanism, like I can't click on the gear menu, show more, and click on tell me what kind of rule this was. That information is not shown in the reports. So the way I can tell how this stuff was added is, especially when there's a rule involved. So you can see all these Adobes were created with auto rules because I did my own explicit manual auto rule. All these Apple were created with a regular rule, and they were accepted through the banking. Notice the first 3 or 4 or 5 that I did before the rule existed, those didn't have the rule. Again, maybe I categorized those right, maybe I did them wrong. Having that gives you additional context. And these Audible were all created by automatic rules, but I didn't create the rule manually at first. So you see that there's nothing in there. And then we see other transactions that are actually missing a payee, which are probably a problem because I really dislike when you don't put a payee in a transaction. We didn't do those. Those were done prior to making this video. But I think that should give you pretty strong context in terms of how rules work and those little tricks of the trade of creating those rules and those memos to those rules. Now I want to show you one more thing, which is a rule. It's called rule priority, which is really, really interesting stuff. And then we'll move on to importing and exporting, that sort of thing. So I'm going to come back here and turn off the grouping one more time. And then I'm gonna create another rule here for, let's say for this Alliance DPC. So I'm gonna come in here, I'm gonna hold the control button or the command button on a Mac and open the rules without necessarily closing this window. I'm gonna go into my tab here, and then I'm gonna create a new rule for Alliance DPC. I'm gonna copy and paste that into payee, go to add, and let's say that's membership fee, let's say it's called. Let me do that one more time. Alliance DPC. And let's go test rule, make sure it's going to work. And we're missing something. Oh yeah, the bank text. I'm going to go back here, bank text, and put Alliance DPC, test rule. Okay, that rule is going to work. I'm going to get rid of auto add for a second. Again, I'm going to come here, space, hashtag rule, and then click on save. And the rule is created. So I'm going to go back into banking here. And then I just want to double check that this is working. Come back here and it's working 100%. And I'm going to go back into rules. I'm going to show you one really interesting thing which is rule priority. So let's say I create a rule that sort of overwrites that rule. As long as it's over the rule in terms of priority, that rule will kick in first before a different rule can kick in. So for example, I'm going to click on new rule, and then I'm going to call this over $1,000. Not that I would ever do this. Usually I don't see any context on this, but it could happen. I'm going to go here to bank text. Sorry, not bank text. I'm going to go to amount. And I'm going to put greater than $1,000. And then where it says category, I'm going to click on ask manager. And I'm literally creating a category or an expense account called Ask Manager. I'm going to put it here under Other Expense and click on Save and Close. And under Payee, I'll leave that blank. Let's say for now, I don't need to do anything else. And I'm just doing this to sort of create a trigger that when the person is doing banking, if something's over $1,000, to, hey, ask someone else first. And again, I personally don't do this for my own firm or my own data entry, but I've seen how for some people, it's just really, really valuable. Okay, so that's done in there. I'm going to go back into banking. And because that rule is sort of at the bottom of the priority, it's really not going to kick in for any transactions over $1,000. Do we have transactions yet? For example, oh, here it is. So it did kick in here because it's there, and there wasn't another rule sort of on top of it. So that kicked in automatically. That might be useful for you or not. With something like this, someone can open that up and at that point manually categorize that without anything happening automatically. that is an option. And so you're seeing this work. You see how the rule works really well. Now I'm going to show you what happens if I put that rule out of category. So I'm going to go here. It says categorized. Not categorized. What am I doing? Back to for your review. Sorry about that. I'm going to click on rules here in the top. Click on rules. And then I'm going to move this priority on this rule all the way to the top. So basically, regardless of what the other rules say, for example, Alliance DPC was being categorized correctly, that rule might override. Now for Alliance, I don't think anything on Alliance was over 1,000, so it shouldn't be an issue, but I'll show you an example right after. So I'm going to go back into banking, and because Alliance wasn't over 1,000, it wasn't overwritten, but let's say we were going to do that for over 100, we see one transaction from Alliance here, 149. That should be a perfect illustration of how that works. I'm going to go back into rules here, and then I'm going to go into this rule that was over 1,000 and then put over 100. Again, that's not realistic. We wouldn't create an overriding rule only for $100. But I'm going to go back into banking. I can use the other tab here and refresh as well. So I don't have to get out of the rules if I want to do that. So I'm going to refresh the banking one more time. And we're going to come back here and notice that Ask Manager is kicked in, right, with all these because they're over 100. But the most important thing is Alliance DPC, the same exact vendor. Notice how it's going to the category for the transactions under 100. And then when it comes to Ask Manager, that one was overwritten. It was overwritten because of the order. Now let's stay here. We're going to stay right here. We're going to come back into rules. Now I'm going to switch the order and put that 1,000 under Alliance DPC. That way Alliance DPC is more powerful than the 1,000. I'm going to come back here and refresh the screen. And then we're going to see if Ask Manager goes away, and it should because of the order of the rules. So we're going to go down here, and exactly as we predicted, the 149 will go back to the other rule because of priority. Okay, so we're done with this first section. Let's move on to exporting and importing bank rules. Now we're halfway through this video, so I think it's pretty amazing that you've made it this far. Number one, because this stuff is not fun to talk about. Banking, bank rules. I mean, it's really pretty nerdy stuff. If you're an accountant, I'm sure you're loving this. If you're a small business owner, I commend you for investing time on learning how to do your own accounting. I love it. This is what I do for a living. I teach people how to do their own accounting, teach people how to use QuickBooks. That's what our firm does. Anyway, let's talk about exporting rules, importing rules, so we can see what that's all about. So I'm going to come up here and go back into rules, and I'm going to go ahead and click here where it says new rule. Next to a little drop-down menu, I'm going to click on export rules. And what that does essentially is it creates an Excel file, and trust me, that Excel file is not easy to read. I'm going to go ahead and attempt to explain to you how this Excel file is structured. And then we're going to make a change or import it back in so we can understand contextually what's happening. So I'm going to go ahead and modify these cells a little bit so they're a little bit easier to read. Okay, and then I'm going to adjust the size of these things. Then I'm going to go to View, make this font bigger, of course. Let's make this a little smaller here. And yeah, this should be pretty good. I think you should get a good idea how these things are structured. So the way this exported Excel file is structured is, and I'll zoom in a little bit more. Will it let me? Yes, it would. 300%. Beautiful. So the first thing you're going to see is rule name. That was that box all the way in the top. Actually, let's come up here. Let's create a rule so we know exactly what's happening. So that's rule name up here, all the way in the top. Let's open up that spreadsheet. Okay. And so that's what goes in here. On the next one, we're going to see this weird syntax, this weird code that contains a couple of things. So right here where it says rule type 10, that basically is an expenditure, or the type or the money out that we're doing, that's money out. And then if there's a very specific bank account that would be filtered, you would see that information there. Right now, it's pretty much all accounts. That's why you see you don't see anything related to specifying specific accounts. So now we're going to see value here. This is rule type 6. That's going to be for, I believe it's bank text. That's what that means. And then Anthony, we actually typed Anthony in there. And then is and rule false. That's going to be this thing, and all, and or any. So is and rule false means any, and if you were putting all, it would be all. Okay, so the next one says rule actions, type action 0. So that's going to be type action 0, which I believe is assign or exclude the one, or maybe expense. Honestly, I really don't know. I really don't care because we're not going to change that. Then the next one is going to be value. So this is the category. That's what this means. That's specific category. What category are we going to put this in? Okay. Then it says here, whoops, I clicked on the right thing. And then it says here, action type 5. That's going to be the payee name. So in this case, that means it's Apple. And then action type 9, that's am I going to add or append a rule? Okay. So that gives you a pretty good idea, more or less, what's happening. Again, I don't memorize what these numbers mean. All I'm going to do is I'm going to take a rule that I like and duplicate it, per se, so to speak. So I'm going to come back here, and let's say a rule that I like is this one that says Alliance DPC, and I'm going to replicate it and do something else with it. I'm actually going to delete the rest of them that are in there. So I'm completely getting rid of them. That way, we are sort of, it's called a starting from scratch. And the only rule that's in there, it's Alliance DPC. If I go back into banking, it should be the only transactions that are automatically created by the rule. So let's do, I'm gonna edit the rule in Excel to show you how that works. Again, I never do this manually in Excel. I'm actually gonna show you how I use my macro to do something like this if I wanted to do something like this. But I'm gonna show you so you understand the inner workings of this special import or export spreadsheet. So I'm going to create a rule for American Airlines. That way these categories that you see right here get automatically categorized. So I'm going to come in here, and then I'm going to delete all these here, and then delete that. Actually, I'm going to undo that for a second. I'm going to click Save As. I'm going to save it first, just because I deleted all the other ones first. So I'm going to keep a backup of my rules. And I suggest you do that too before you delete rules. If your rules are messy, export them first before you delete them. So now I'm going to go ahead and delete them and just leave Alliance DPC. And the reason why I say leave one that you like is because essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this one, and then I'm going to paste it. Okay. So the rule name on this one is going to be called American Airlines. And then we're going to come here to the rules, and it says what is going to be in this case, the bank text per se. Actually, no, this is I think the first one's the bank text. Let's just make sure that I'm not making a mistake here. I'm going to click on edit. Okay, so the first one is this one, correct? The bank text, okay? So I'm going to change this to American Air. Notice I'm not typing airlines, because when I go back into QuickBooks here and I look at specifically that American Airlines transaction, notice that it doesn't actually say American Airlines, it says American Air. So if it's not completely spelled out, it's not going to work. So I'm telling it that the text I'm searching for, it's American Air. Then I'm going to go here to the right-hand side, and then where we're going to categorize this. So I'm going to put this under travel. So I'm going to go back into QuickBooks here, and then I'm going to see my categories. We have travel, and then we also have one called airfare. So it's a couple of ways to approach this. So one, we can do just type travel, or then one we can just type airfare, whatever works better for you. So I'm going to put here airfare. Now for now, I'm just going to use a sub account, not the full path. So I'm just going to use airfare as a sub account for now. And then you categorize this under uncategorized for now. That way, when you kind of see that in there, so when we bring the rule, we see that contrast. So I'm going to put that on the airfare, and then here it says, what's the vendor name that we're going to attach it to? So I'm going to go into my payee list. I'm going to go into vendors, and if I have an American Airlines in there, so let me type American. Okay, it looks like I don't. The vendor has to exist first, otherwise I have to create it on the fly. So I'm going to create my vendor, American Airlines Corp. Notice I'm even adding more text to it. That's okay. No big deal. And then I'm going to go back into my Excel, and then I'm going to type American Airlines. And I'm misspelling it sort of on purpose so I can show you kind of what happens. And then we'll keep everything else in here. What I like to do usually when I import the rules is I type here, imported rule. That way I know that I did it in Excel prior to importing. Again, I'm creating all these context clues in my data entry. This is a personalized approach. You don't have to do this, okay? So we did that. Let's go to the next one. And let's go back into banking. So I'm going to import two. So we'll do two of them sort of on the fly here. The next one I'll do is, let's do AT&T. That's good. So the original thing just says AT&T. So I'm gonna create the vendor on the fly here. That's a good thing to do. Create the vendor here. And I'm not going to categorize it. I just created the vendor. I'll copy this. And I'm going to go back in here. And I'm going to copy and paste. And I got to copy that vendor name one more time. Go back into my Excel. Paste that in here. And I'm going to come here and say, what do you want to, or what are you detecting from the bank text? It's just ATT. So just ATT because, well, that's what we saw, right? Yep, that's exactly what we saw. So we got ATT in there. Then I'm going to go into the right here. And then the category is going to be telephone. I don't know what is it called here. So let's do telephone, or we have phones, right? But that's under a long-term office equipment phones. Probably not good. Let's do utilities. Okay, so we have phone service under utilities. So I'm going to use that category. I'm going to come back in here and then paste that. And then, okay, I'm good to go. So I'm going to click on save. Now, you might be asking, am I ever going to go into my Excel and do this? The answer is no, absolutely not. Actually, I missed one more thing here, which is, I think I put it in the wrong place. So phone service goes in this side. My mistake. Good thing I cut it while I was doing that. So phone service comes in here. And then this was the vendor name. So AT&T. So in this case, I spelled AT&T correctly. In this space, I misspelled it, just so we can see exactly what that looks like. And then I'm going to click on save. So as I was saying, would you ever find yourself exporting the spreadsheet, editing the spreadsheet? No. If you ever do that, you're kind of crazy, because it's much faster to manually create the rules than all this craziness that I'm doing. But the reason why I'm showing you this is because if you have a spreadsheet with vendor names and categories already next to it, aka maybe you got a database, a bunch of accounting that you've done in the past, you can use a special macro. I'll show you really quick what it looks like. It's a special spreadsheet that creates a macro and goes from, let's say, data that you bring in like this, right, where you got vendor name and category, and I go to create rules, and it creates the rules for me. So we'll go back to that in a second, because I know that's probably the exciting piece out of this whole thing. But I went ahead and finished my spreadsheet. I'm going to click on save, close that. Notice that AT&T is not being categorized by a rule, and American Airlines is not being categorized by a rule. So I'm going to go back into rules. Now I'm going to import the spreadsheet that I just exported and modified. I'm actually going to delete the rule that's here now. That way we're zero. Remember that alliance was in the spreadsheet. I'm going to come in here and go to import rules. And again, I want you to think of not necessarily export to import back into the same file. I want you to think of, you manage multiple company files and they behave very similar. If you got an awesome set of rules that you manually created, or through automation or whatever technique you use from the first half hour of this video, that you can export that and import it in another company file. That's awesome. You want to save that work. So I'm going to bring that rule back in here. That rules. And then you see all the rules. Actually, that's the one that I backed up first. I'm going to go back. That's not the one that I wanted to import. Let's go back here and go to import rules. Go to browse. And figure out where I put this in. I put this in the desktop somewhere maybe. Let's see. That's in the desktop. Go to next. Okay, yeah, there we go. So these are the three that we just, or one that was there, and the two that we created. Notice that this worked perfectly. Now I'm going to click on next, and QuickBooks is going to automatically detect if your categories were caught correctly, or if you used the full path correctly, or the correct vendor name correctly. It will automatically detect it. If you remember, with American Airlines, I don't have a vendor called American Airlines. If I go to type American, it's called American Airlines altogether, Corp. So you can translate that into your own file. This is going to happen very often when you go from one file to the other, where the categories are different, when the vendor names are different. And notice that it didn't actually pick up any of the categories because we didn't use a full path and these were sub-accounts. But if that happens, then you can come up here and search it. So you can just type membership and subscription. So you can quickly type it and find it because you have the cheat sheet here on the left, and then type phone service. And this happens, whoops, that wasn't the one. So, and this happens again because when we use sub-accounts, this stuff happens to be kind of tricky. Then I'm going to click on import, and that's going to bring all the imported rules in the company file. Now I want to add one more thing. I'm actually not going to save this. I'm going to go to cancel, and I'm going to open that spreadsheet one more time. Okay, there it is. And I'm actually going to use the full and the correct vendor name and the correct account name. So I'm going to go back here to American Airlines, and type Corp. So I'm actually going out of my way to make sure it's spelled correctly. And then under these categories, I'm going to use the full path. And one of the issues generally with these is it's harder to figure out what the full path is. So I'm going to come back here and I'm going to go into new rule here for a second, just so I can tell what the categories are. I'm going to type travel, select, was that airfare? Yeah, airfare. And then I'm going to take the full path in this particular case, click on copy, go back into my spreadsheet. And notice this time around, I'm going to paste the full path in there. Beautiful. And then for phone service, I'll do the same. Phone service. So right here is utilities. Right here, utilities phone service. So I'm taking this from my QuickBooks files, chart of accounts, phone service. And then I'll leave members and subscriptions up there so you can see in contrast. And I'm going to click on save. Close that. I don't need to have that anymore. Then I'm going to go back into QuickBooks. I don't have any rules in here. I'm going to click on the drop-down menu, click on import rules, bring in that rule. This is on my desktop. Perfect. Go to next, right here in the bottom right. Go to next. And okay, these are coming in. Notice that now my full categories are coming in with the sub-accounts. Click on next. Now notice when I did it this time, it did detect these accounts, right? I didn't detect membership because it wasn't doing the full path. So again, I have to find it first. And American Airlines, I don't know why I didn't catch that. Maybe I misspelled something in the process. But I'm just showing you the more accurate that spreadsheet is, or that the actual vendor names, the account names, the less of this sort of pre-import work you need to do. So then I'm going to click on import, and then the rules are in here. If a rule is duplicated, it'll tell you it cannot be done. So I kind of imported that one before by itself during the video editing process. I cut that piece, but they're all in there now. They're all brought in through the import process. I'm going to go into banking, and now I should see those Alliance DPC back in there, American Airlines back in there, phone utilities back in there. I'm going to go into rules. I'm going to import the ones I had deleted before. So just to show you import rules, and I'm going to come here to browse, and I think I had these under downloads, and go to Dex, and I think I had like 6 or 7 rules in there. I'm bringing them back in so that, after I did this backup, and then notice that again, if the full category is not there, it's not in the actual file, and this happens very often with sub-accounts. It's almost never going to be a perfect thing. I'm going to go to import, and then once I do that, any rules that are duplicated, they're not going to come in. Go to finish. Now we see sort of a plethora of rules in here. Go back into banking, and then you should see more rules being applied across the board because I imported more rules. All right, grand finale here. Let's talk about the third section, which is coming from an Excel database with vendor names, with payees next to them, and creating bank rules and importing them to speed up your bank rule creation process. So we'll go back into a QuickBooks file here, and let's just go over. There's a lot of transactions here that don't have rules associated with them. I'm going to go back here into rules. I'm going to delete that weird rule that we created for the $100 We don't need that. That's actually going to confuse things. So I'm going to get rid of that one. I'm just going to go back into banking, and to see that we have, look, we got 1,700 transactions in there. A lot of them things don't have rules associated with them. I'm going to get rid of all the ones that already have rules. I'm going to click on rules applied here. I'm going to click on select all and then click on accept. So when rules are created, we do a lot of transactions. Notice we did almost 100 transactions all in one shot. However, what takes a long time is creating these rules. So what do I do? So number one is I import the vendor names. That's the single most important piece. Creating vendors takes a very long time. So I'm going to click on the gear menu, and then I'm going to go here under 300, which is a maximum amount of transaction that it allows me to show in one shot. And then I'm going to come in here and click on export to Excel. That's going to create a spreadsheet for me. Okay. For now, I'm just going to do the first 300 so we can kind of see how that works. Then I'm going to open up that spreadsheet, and let's make this a little bit bigger. Let's make this maybe 200%. And then we have a whole bunch of vendors or payees in here. One thing, notice prior to me exporting, I organized these or sorted these by name. That way we can spot them or find the patterns quicker. Okay, so I'm gonna let's just make this spreadsheet bigger. And the first thing I'm gonna do is, I don't need any of these other pieces of information. I'm gonna delete the date. I'm gonna delete the category because I actually don't want that stuff to like mess me up. The amount, I'm gonna delete all that. And basically all I have here is one column with payee names. I'm gonna delete these that say payee as well, just for now. And I just have payee names, that's all I have. I'm gonna select the entire column. I'm gonna go into data, and there should be a button that says remove duplicates. Remove all the duplicates, click OK, because I'm really looking for unique vendors or payees. There we go. Even within this, there's gonna be some duplicates. For example, if we go down and see these two right here, Bites Grill Western, let's say they're the same thing. So I'm gonna delete one of them. Okay, so that's unnecessary duplicate. Right here, no, these are different. Let's see what else is potential. Okay, these two birds, I don't need two of them. So I'll just get rid of one of them. And then let's see if we got BP, I don't need multiple of them. Get rid of that. Let's see, Chevron, I don't need a lot of them. Delete them. So I'm just gonna keep one. Chick-fil-A, I only need one. Chimney Rock, yeah, I probably only just need one. And let's see, any other duplicates. It's kind of a manual process to find the duplicates. Costco, just one. CVS, just one. Delta Air, definitely just one. And I think that's it. We don't have any more duplicates. Other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of certain pieces of information that are not so relevant. So I'm going to get rid of these numbers just because transaction by transaction, numbers and codes like these are going to be different. So I cannot create rules with store numbers, transaction codes. So I'm just going through them here and making sure that, okay, this is a good example. That's a duplicate. So anything with a number, again, represents store number, location number, that sort of thing. I'm getting rid of that. Okay, so just doing a quick cleanup. And this seems like it takes some time, but trust me, once you start doing this in Excel, you got mouse on one hand, other hand on the keyboard. You could go through these. Look, Chipotle Online, that's a duplicate. You could do it pretty fast. Okay, I think I'm pretty good with this. Yep, let's do that. Pretty good with that. Okay, there's another one, and the BP, of course, BP. That one too. Boston Market. Oh man, thought I was ready. Okay, there you go. So I cleaned up my vendor list pretty good. There's another one here, AMC Western. Let's see any other numbers. Burger King as well. Circle K. Man, they just keep creeping up. Okay, I think we're good now. Okay, so now I'm gonna save this somewhere. This is my master vendor pay spreadsheet. I'm gonna keep that. I'm actually gonna work on that in a second. But I'm gonna come in here and go into expenses, vendors, because I'm gonna import that spreadsheet of all my vendors. So right now I only got a few vendors. Look, only 16 vendors so far. So I'm gonna go to here it says new vendor. Click on import vendors. I may have done that too fast. So I went into expenses, vendors. So I went to my vendors database. Then where it says new vendor, I went next to it and I clicked on import vendors. Also, I can click on the gear menu, go to import data, and then go into vendor. They all work the same thing. It goes into the import vendor screen. I'm going to click on browse. I'm going to find that vendor list, which I think is this one, and then click on next, and there it is. So I'm going to go, the column says description. I'm going to tell it which column am I importing. I'm not importing cell phone numbers or addresses, opening balance. I'm just only importing payee names. Then I'm going to click on next, and there we go. All my payees, 99 payees are being imported. Import. So that took a couple minutes, but now that's 99 times I don't have to click on add vendor. So think about the value of that. If there's any duplicates, those won't come in. Great, no problem. Click on X, yes, go back into my vendors database, and yep, certainly there's a lot more. Now 113 vendors. So those imported, which is a good thing. When I go back into banking, I haven't imported any rules yet, but when I go back into banking, you're going to notice that even with me not importing any rules, already QuickBooks is starting to make connection with some of these vendors I imported into QuickBooks and automatically adding that for you. That's incredible. That by itself is extremely valuable. The next thing is I want to categorize some of these things correctly. So I can create, at this point, we can go back to the beginning of the video, create rules. We just saved the time that it takes to create a lot of these vendors. Not all of them, but a lot of them, as you can tell, that were brought in here. Obviously, anything that I delete a number, stuff like that, is not exact, so it might not catch it. And also, it could also miss things. Like this is actually pretty clear how it missed it. Now, these are not rules. These are sort of like suggestions. And this AT&T BP, great example. So it's not always perfect. For the most part, it's pretty good, but it's not always perfect. So now what we're going to do is we're going to import those rules. First thing we're going to do is we're going to open that special spreadsheet I created. And I know some of you are thinking, well, Hector, I don't have your spreadsheet and I can't imitate this piece. So a couple of things. If you bought my banking course, that's included in my banking course. And my banking course is like 6 hours long, and I go over so many little details and nooks and crannies of banking and bank reconciliation and categorization. So if you're interested in that, I'll put a link to that course. You can either buy the course outright, or you can buy a monthly subscription to it if you want a more limited access to it. That's one. Or two, if you don't have the banking course, I'll put a link to just buying this macro off me. But trust me, you should just get the course because you're going to learn contextually how this stuff works together much, much better. But that stuff will go in the description. A lot of you, my banking course is the most popular course that I sell. A lot of you probably already have it. You just have to go in there and find it. And if you can't find it, email me. If you're part of the course, it should be in there. Anyway, so what we're going to do is we're going to take our chart of accounts and we're going to put it next to our payees, and we're going to pick categories for all of our payees. And then once we have that done, we're going to copy and paste it in the spreadsheet for the macro to work. Okay. So let me go back. Where's my other file here? Yep. There's my list of vendors. And what I'm going to do is, for now, we're not going to do anything on this macro spreadsheet yet. I'm going to put this to the side. I'll just give you some context of what we're going to end up doing. Now what I want to do is I want to put a category next to each of these. Now, before I do that, I don't want to just look up QuickBooks, type the category. I don't want to do any of that. What I want to do is I want to import or export my categories, put them in Excel to make it easier for me to type. I also noticed that these Adidas is a duplicate, so I'm going to delete that too. Okay. All right, good. So I got my spreadsheet there waiting for me to bring in my chart of accounts. So I'm going to go into my chart of accounts. Let's go into the gear menu and then go into chart of accounts. Good. And then I'm going to click on run report. That's basically my account list report. You could also do that by going into reports and then in the search type account, you go to account list. Same thing, two ways to get there. Then I'm going to go to customize. I'm going to go to filter. And I'm only going to show my expense accounts. For now, let's say I'm only focused on expense categories, or in this case, if I want to see expense and cost of goods sold categories, if I want to see both of these, then I click on all income and expense accounts and just delete the income accounts afterwards. And I'm going to click on run, and then it's income, expense, and cost of goods sold. Now I'm going to export this in Excel. Okay, so it's a new spreadsheet, a different spreadsheet. I'm going to bring it here to this screen, and I'm going to zoom in so you can see. And I'm going to get rid of stuff I don't need. I don't need the first two columns. That's garbage. I can delete that. I don't need the header. That's garbage. I can delete that. And I actually don't need any of these other descriptions, type. I don't need any of this stuff. I'm going to delete the income accounts because these are credit card transactions. There's never going to be income in there, but you can leave them if you're doing bank-in rules. So I'm going to click on delete, and I'm going to delete everything else here. I don't need that. And basically, all I have is my cost of goods sold and expense categories. Beautiful thing. Then I'm going to come down here, see how many there are. So there are 99 accounts in total. 99 accounts in total. So I'm going to toss this to the side here for a second and put it on the left side here. And then I'm going to go into the one where I have my vendor or payee names. And then here in the one where I have my accounts, I'm going to insert a column. And I'm just going to, here on the first thing, I'm just going to put an X. And I'm just going to copy down because I'm actually not doing anything with the ones with the X's. What matters is what I'm doing right after. So I'm going to take all my list of payees. I know this is crazy Excel stuff, but once you learn it, you see how quickly I'm doing it. Copy and paste my payees, which are already in QuickBooks, by the way. So all I'm going to do is give these categories. And the reason why I'm specifically doing it like this, because if I have a list of entries directly above anywhere I'm going to do data entry, those entries get automatically filled or you get auto suggestions. So I'm going to close that. I'm going to focus now on this one, where basically I have one column with all my accounts and another column with all my payee names. And I'm also going to zoom this in 200%. Let's do 300%. You can see that better. So we're going to start here with 12 Bones Smokehouse, whatever that is. That's going to be meals. So I'm going to start typing meals. And notice that the auto suggestions starts suggesting things because the categories are right above it. It's a really specific Excel trick. So I'm going to do meals with clients. And I'm going to go to the next one. So let's say 8th Avenue North Liquor. Let's say that's personal. And it looks like I don't have a personal expense account. For now, I'm just going to leave it at there. We'll see what happens after. So I'm going to do personal expense because that one wasn't in there. I'm going to do the same thing with Adidas. For this, I'm going to look for membership or there's something with membership up here. I'm going to search it. It might be a different subcategory right here. Office expensive. Oh, no, not that one. Let's see. Okay, general business expense, membership subscriptions. Okay, so once I know what it is and you kind of start learning your chart of accounts, I start typing GEN and then I go membership and subscriptions. Beautiful. Then Rec Saver. I don't know what that is. Let's say that's insurance. So let's say that's liability insurance. PayPal, Airbnb, that's travel. So we'll do travel hotels. Ale Meat, that's meals. Let's say meals with clients. All-in-one construction, let's say that's repairs and maintenance. There it is. Okay. All golf, yeah, that's personal. Alliance Travel Insurance, we'll do insurance and liability. I guess I'm okay with that. Amazon Prime, let's do general membership and subscriptions. AMC Western, that's personal expense. I know what this is. I'm going to call this personal expense too. Let's say that's personal expense as well. Let's say that's travel. It's got New York on it. Let's say that's travel. Let's say that's taxi. Then Enyo Salumi, that's meals with clients. Annual membership, that's general membership and subscriptions. That's meals with clients. Again, I don't want to bore you with how I categorize stuff, but this gives you a good general idea. And once you have a database like this, and you start, especially if you manage multiple QuickBooks Online files, you can create this huge database of vendors and categories. And if you use the same chart of accounts across the board, you can be importing rules and vendor names and chart of accounts like crazy, and you can be doing super fast work. But for now, again, imagine I did all of them, right? So I'm going to come in here and bring these in here. So basically it's vendor name and category, and bring those in. I'm ignoring the X's, of course. I'm going to bring these in, and now I have basically a set of payees and a set of accounts or categories next to it. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to bring in now my magical spreadsheet, and then I'm going to paste in here. I like to paste values, usually the better way to do it. And basically I brought in my payee, I brought in my categories. Perfect. All I need to do here is tell it whether it's a money in or money out. I usually do all money ins and all money outs in different batches. So I'm going to do one expense and then double click here and just bring that down. So the spreadsheet knows if it's expense, it's money out. If it's deposit is the other category, it's money in. Okay, beautiful. So now I'm going to click on create rules and go into my rules tab and see what happened here. Everything, all that boring stuff that we did in Excel, that was done for me automatically. I had to take you through the process of showing you how this spreadsheet worked and how the data was organized, so you get to appreciate the work that was put into automating this, okay? So that's there, okay? Now, some of the cool things, and I'm just gonna click on save, okay? And the reason why this works, I can just save it, because as long as this rules tab is the very first tab or the very first sheet, and it contains the rules that we created from payee, where it says create rules, that's gonna work. One last thing I'll add is there's a tab for chart of accounts where you can actually copy and paste the chart of accounts in here. And if you choose to paste the vendor names here and categorize from here, you can use it as a drop-down menu. You don't have to use the drop-down menu. You could just simply copy and paste if you use the separate spreadsheet method that I use. Some people like to just bring the payees here and do the categorization here. Some people like that special trick when I pasted them right on top. That way they autofill. And now in this case, we have it drop down as an option. So you have multiple ways of doing this sort of pre-work. But the nice thing is, now I'm going to close this. Now I'm going to import. I'm going to go back into QuickBooks, go back into my banking rules, and I'm going to import the rules I just created. And I'm going to go. So notice we have 8 rules so far. And I'm going to go to new rule. Next to it, click on import rules. Go to browse. And I have this on the desktop, I think. Yep, there it is. Take that sheet that I was working on. Click on next. And there's only 5. There's 5 rules that are basically sort of duplicates per se. So it's not going to import duplicate rules, but everything else is in here. So I'm going to click on next, and now see it's almost perfect. All golf was the only issue here. I don't know why I didn't catch that one. And then here personal expense. Do we have a personal? Yeah, we do. Oh, see, we missed it because it was missing an S, which is good. So you have this little sort of middle window, making sure everything is jiving correctly. So I'm going to click on import, and now all the rules are being created. Some rules weren't able to be created. I would have to go back and check exactly why it didn't do that. Okay, it's probably the special characters. It looks like that little asterisk causes the issue, or maybe the commas are causing the issue. Probably should have mentioned that. You got to get rid of commas, got to get rid of asterisks, because rules don't allow you to bring in special characters. I think we may have had that issue when we were doing the Anthony's with the apostrophe. So that was my mistake. So ignore it. Just when you do it, when you clean up the payee names, make sure that you don't have asterisks or commas in there. I think it'll be worth it to prove it to you. And I think maybe it was also worth it to get that error just so we can kind of have that issue happen. So let me open that again. Where is my file? Yep, there it is. So I'm going to open that again. Let me enable the macros. Okay, and then square. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to find this. I'm going to click on, I'll do Control F or Command F. And I'm going to find in this case, the asterisks. Let's go to find all. Okay, asterisks. Finding asterisks is an issue because asterisk means all. So it won't work with find and replace in this case. So you have to manually do it. With the comma, I could. So I can do find the comma, and let me do find all. There's one of them. I can replace that with nothing. That can just get rid of the comma. That cleans this up. For the star, I can't, so I'm gonna have to manually go in there and delete those stars. Unfortunately, that's something that I'm gonna delete the SQ also, which means square. That's also a little nuance of this. So no special characters. So I'm gonna save it just to make sure that now when I import it, I won't have the same error, just to kind of verify that that's gonna happen. So I'm gonna go to import rules. I'm gonna go to browse, select that spreadsheet, and there we go. All gonna be imported without an error now because we removed those special characters. And that's it. That's the entire lesson. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll see you on the next one. One more thing. Make sure you check the description below for the links. If you want to take my full banking class, I'll give you a link to that. If you want to just get my spreadsheet, if you want to, I sell that too. I'll put a link to that and any other related videos I may have on this context of banking and banking rules. I'll put that on the description as well. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.